With all the track work now completed on the main village board, it was now time to move on to the adjoining module. This is going to be the Slate Quarry section, where the track will rise up from the village and into the mountains and the slate workings. The rock face has already been installed. This was made up from a collection of Woodland Scenics mouldings blended together. At the top of the slope we see the beginnings of where the slate waste tip is going to be built. Returning to the bottom of the slope, we see where the access to the village tunnel is located. I need to have continued access to this tunnel section for cleaning, maintenance and derailments, etc. So to this end I have built a separate section which can be lifted out of the way when needed. But first I need to check, by putting the engine shed buildings in place, that I can still lift it cleanly in and out as required. Once I was satisfied that everything is okay there, it was time to move on and start working on the cliff face. Having previously given everything a base coating of light grey, I then started work on the waste slate tip area. The slope, made from wooden formers, had previously been coated in my own mix comprising of bandages covered in plaster of Paris. This was followed by a sprinkling of some fine grey granules to start adding some texture to the surface. The rock face was then given a second coating comprising a watery mix of a slightly darker grey. This was then allowed to run into the nooks and crevices of the rock face in order to give more texture and definition to it. The next little job was to add some burnt umber. This was pushed into the cracks and onto the ledges of the rock in order to represent places where earth might have accumulated and allowed vegetation to grow. Once that was dry, the final coating, and the one that I find most effective, was to dry brush on a sprinkling of very light grey. This highlights the uneven surface of the rocks and gives a very effective appearance to finish off with. So finally, let's take a look at the completed project, starting off with the removable section that I've been working on at the same time so that it matches the finished rock face. Grasses and flowers have been added to the rock face, and a mixture of grass flock fibres were added, especially around the waste tip area where weeds could occur. So work on this section is now completed for the time being, and the next stage will be to work on the actual slate mine and ancillary buildings which will be located on the plateau above the rock face.